Hey, Fraser.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Yourself?
I'm running late today, so I'm a bit rushed.
You had one of those mornings, have you?
It's been a bit of a crazy morning, but you get them. We all get them.
We do. Could be worse. You could be in a tropical cyclone or
Well,
something
I
in
was
New
about
Zealand.
to be. I was
Ah,
about to
there
be.
you
That's the point. Yeah, yeah.
go. Oh, we are here to talk about today video SOA workshops that we've got coming up, and we were also going to have a chat about quality advice review if we have time. I'm going to fix my lights actually.
Yeah. Super excited. We do have some workshops coming up. We've been planning them for some time. We've ran a number of workshops last year, and we've got some great stuff happening with the video SOA this year with the tech providers as well getting involved. And so another soapbox episode coming out so shortly. But definitely here to announce the events that are coming up in March.
Yes, so we've got the dates down below, but we're going around the country. So we've got coming up in Perth on the 15th of March. Then we'll be in Brisbane on the 24th of March, Sydney on the 28th of March, and Melbourne on the 30th of March. So the last 2 weeks in March, we're going to be coming around the country and we are going to be helping people learn how to do video SOAs.
Yep. Now let's go through quickly go through the day itself. It's a full day workshop style, so getting your hands dirty, I guess, or getting hands on. There's going to be a little bit of helping everybody that's in the room and helping each other, as well as giving it a go, giving it a trial. I think the big thing to remember about these workshops is the purpose of the day is that so you can actually leave the workshop and pretty much be ready to go. You know what to do, you know how to do it, you've tried it, you've spoken to others about how they're doing it, and you're going to be able to start implementing in your practice.
Yeah, so we go through everything from what we mean by video SOAs to going through the agenda that we've provided to everybody so that they can know what has to actually go into an SOA and they can be comfortable that they're meeting all their regulatory obligations. We go through the technology that you need, which is, fairly simple. You need a camera and you need a microphone and something to record with. So that's pretty much that. And then we do some practice sessions. So we pair up and we do some practices.
Yeah, there's and which is a bit of a cringe factor for a lot of people, but I think it's like the very first meeting you do. You got to get those first couple out of the way to be able to bin them and not worry about having to them go anywhere. So I think it's a really, really important step if you get involved in that way. It's a like I said, it's a full day. It's a workshop. There'll be work to do. There'll be things to do for you. There's activities that we need to be done. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the invites? How can people find the event?
Yeah, so if you look at the bottom of the screen here, there is a ticker rolling past, and at fpa.com.au/events, we've got each of the 4 sessions that we've got scheduled in the events there. So you just click on the event that you're interested in, be it Perth on the 15th of March, Brisbane on the 24th of March, Sydney on the 28th of March, or Melbourne on the 30th of March. Just click on the event and it'll take you to the registration page.
Yep. And who should attend, Ben? Who should we have there?
Everyone. Everyone. But to that point, no, we've had a lot of planners. So we've had maybe 140 planners attend the events. We've had compliance staff, we've had paraplanners, we have had lawyers, we've had the technology teams at some of the licensees coming along. So we've had a big variety of people who've actually turned up. So we're over 160, a bit over 160 people have come through the training sessions that we've had so far. We had a great catch up with a lot of them last week. And so the feedback we're getting is really positive. We've got, there's a good 15, 20 plus of them that are actually doing video SOAs, have started to do them with clients. There's some that are just about to start. There are some that are still trying to figure out how to make it work. But everybody's kind of progressing along this pathway to start getting them out the door.
Yeah, and we answer a lot of those what but questions as we go through. But as Ben said, there's been a lot of compliance people come through already, loving it, of course. But if you're not sure, bring your practice manager, bring your compliance person if you want to. power planners have been along. People brought their staff along that are going to help them out to make it a bit of a team environment. Now, there is a cost to the workshop, of course. They're not free workshops, but the cost, we believe the cost of the workshop certainly would pay itself off pretty quickly.
Yes, and I think one of my colleagues has put the link in the comments. So if you look down in the comments, you should be able to see that in there. But yeah, no, the feedback has been feedback's been really positive. So that's good. And then, as you said, we're also starting to prepare a second box set of videos. So if anybody needs the first box set of videos, I'm going to put a link in there in a second as well. But what are we working on with the second lot, Fraser?
Yep. Now, just on that, we've had some questions over time, and as the quality advice review comes out and more information comes out to how that's going to land, I guess you're probably the perfect person to speak about that. There's some conversations always been around what if SOAs don't exist anymore, and how's that going to affect the idea of recording your meetings and recording your advice meetings. Tell us a little bit about how you see the quality of advice playing a role in the future of video SOAs.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the recommendations, if I haven't quite remembered the numbers perfectly yet, but recommendation number 9 that Michelle Levy has made in the quality advice review is that requirement to provide an SOA or a record of advice should be replaced with a requirement for providers of personal advice to retail clients to maintain complete records of the advice provided, which we do anyway, and to provide written advice on request to the client. So no SOAs, no ROAs, should this be implemented, and I'll come back to the implementation process. But I think we've had a few questions just in the last couple of days. If it says provide written advice, does that mean I need to provide a written document with words on a page? And you probably have to have a look at the case law and some legal dictionaries as to what is actually written, what the definition of written is. And effectively, the definition of written is actually something that can be copied and reproduced when required. And so a video file can be copied and reproduced, and so that meets the legal definition of written advice under there. So we don't think there should be a massive change if this requirement not to provide an SOA or an ROA comes through in terms of these recommendations that Michelle has made, because recording the meeting and providing the advice in the meeting, if the client asks for a record or a written copy of what you provided them, then you can just send them the video file and it'll meet your regulatory obligations.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the idea of recording the advice, which is kind of what we've been talking about, you have an advice meeting, you follow an agenda, you make sure you hit the appropriate points. If it's a statement of advice, then it's making sure you hit the appropriate points from 175 and the other regulatory guides available, and the Corps Act, of course. But making sure you hit those points in the conversation, explaining them to the client and recording the conversation. And that's essentially what the video SOA is. But that recording of conversations, I think, will be something that just continues on, whether it's a statement of advice or whether it's any recommendation of advice.
That's right. And so more what we go through in these training sessions and what we're doing with the video SOA workshops is what's the process you should go through to make sure that you are hitting all the points that you need to hit. And so, if you are going to be providing advice, you still need to have a basis of the advice. So how do you articulate the basis of why it's appropriate for you to make the recommendations you're making? You're still going to have to provide the recommendations to the client. So how do you ensure that you've provided all the recommendations you need to provide? If you're replacing products, you're still going to need to compare products with each other. How do you have that conversation with the client and in terms of, I'm going to replace product A with product B? And so the process that you go through, the agenda that we've set up can be used and tailored, and we encourage members to tailor them as they're going through this process. But the process should almost be exactly the same, irrespective of the fact that you're not having to create something that's got statement of advice on the cover, and he's called a statement of advice. But the process itself probably won't change.
Yeah, I actually like some of the things that are in statements of advice, and I don't like the fact that it's become this regulatory compliance tool thing. But explaining to a client what the scope of the advice is in a quick explanation often is a good thing. Explaining to them how you came up with the recommendations is a good thing. Like a lot of clients appreciate that sort of stuff. But when you're not having to. You could still follow those sorts of things, but you don't have to necessarily, with the quality of advice, hit those, that written piece or that SOA, the obligations that came with that, and the headaches that came with that, just to be able to explain it to the client so that they understand. I think it's a great thing and should continue.
Absolutely. And one of the best things about the agenda, in my view, because I stuffed up the other day, admittedly, is there are some housekeeping things like I'm about to hit record. The other day we had a meeting with a number of the video SOA people, and I forgot to hit record, so I don't have a copy of that session. And so it's it's about making sure you follow your process every time, irrespective of not having to give them a physical document at the end.
Yep. Now, Peter's raised a really good point here about having a structure or a script around making sure you hit the right points.
That's right, and that's the point of the agenda. Maybe I don't know if I can share screen here. Maybe I can. I'll see if I can figure out how to share the screen. But yeah, so as I said before, you need to make sure you've got your basis. You need to make sure you make the recommendations. You need to make sure you tell the client why they're in their best interest and what some of the risks are. You need to make sure you, if you're replacing products, you need to make sure that you give any warnings if the client's given you incomplete information or hasn't or wants to implement, well, time critical. Not so time critical in a video SOA format because the client's there receiving the advice when you provide it. They're creating the SOA with you.
Yeah, I think we've got to remember that with any piece of advice, the basis of a statement of advice and the reason that it exists or the purpose or the aims of it is to provide the client with the relevant information that they need to make an informed decision, whether to proceed with the advice or not proceed with the advice. And that's what the whole idea of this advice meeting is to provide the client with the relevant information to make that decision, the relevant information to that client, not just the relevant information to, or every single piece of information that's available on that topic. And the other thing is to make sure that they've had the appropriate time to consider whether that, their circumstances, to consider that information and to be able to make an informed and a decision where they understand the information that they're making or the basis of the information that they're making their decision on. So if you can tick all those boxes and you've recorded it, there's very little in the way of, what was meant or what was inferred or referred to or by the conversation because it's recorded. I think it's a great defense. It's a great way to educate or get the clients to go back and rewatch it if they weren't sure. And rewatching it is the correct term because if you're recording the actual meeting, they're in it in the first place. So we're sort of going into some of the topics of the workshop, but no, I think as far as that's concerned, if you're interested in the workshop, then I would highly recommend you jump on that link and see if you can register in one of the states near you.
Yeah, and I can't post to LinkedIn at the second, so I'm going to put the links to the video SOA box set if anybody wants to catch up and start to watch those and get an idea of what we're talking about. And I'm also going to post a copy of the agenda, so you can have a look at what the structure of the video SOA meeting that we've proposed is. But what you'll see is that it's just the meeting you would otherwise run with the client, but with some structure around it. But as I said, I was going to talk about one of the questions we get is like, when is the quality of advice review going to be implemented? How long is it going to take? And there's a possibility that government will start to implement some quick wins do some things more quickly. And maybe this SOA one is one of the things that you could argue is a quick win. But on the other hand, it's probably quite a large change to the Corporations Act. And that often takes them a while, particularly around disclosure, to think about the consumer protection aspects, the what it's going to mean for consumers, getting some comfort around that. If you have a look back at some of the major regulatory change that's happened in the last 15 years around financial advice, in 2009 we had the Ripple report, or the report that looked at advice around what happened during the GFC, and FOFA came out of that, and it took nearly 4 years to implement FOFA off the back of this consultation that happened around the Ripple report. In 2014, we had the inquiry that kind of led to the FASEA standards, or the education standards, and those really came into effect in 2017. That's when that law was passed, and we started into the transition timeframe. The life insurance framework reviews took place in 2014. That started to take effect, and the law was passed in 2017 as well. The Royal Commission happened in 2018, and we've only just seen in 2021, 2022, most of the laws implemented around that. It takes about 3 years for these things to actually play out. And so if we're going to wait, if you're frustrated with SOAs, if you're frustrated with the way that you're providing advice and the engagement you're having with clients, and clients saying, I don't want 80 to 100 page sort of paper that I have to read through and slog through, and if you're frustrated that it takes you 10 to 15 hours to create an SOA, and that's adding $3,500 to the cost of actually providing advice to the client, then video SOA is a way to start today. Maybe not today, probably need to come to one of our training sessions and make sure you got your head around it fully, but it's a way to get going much quicker, start to improve the efficiency of your advice process, start to improve the engagement you've got with your client, start to improve the outputs that you're providing to the client, and giving them something that's meaningful and quick and engaging and efficient, and will save you a lot of time and money today, rather than waiting for 3 years for something to be implemented.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There is a massive time savings from the firms that have come through this, and often producing some sort of a documentation, a short form explanation or a summary of the advice, and then using the video, the recording it to be the actual SOA, and providing the client with both. There's been a huge time saving, but there's also been a huge cost saving with a lot of the firms that have brought this in, and just going, you know what, we've spent 40-50% of our time producing the actual advice, and 50 to 60% of the time on the paper document, and we've been able to save that 50 to 60% of the time that's involved in producing advice. So I think there's been some massive wins from economy wins versus the time wins, and being able to service more clients. So I think outside of the fact that how the new reforms kick in or don't, or when or why or whatever that might be, I think there's some wins to be had in February and March and April of 2023 that will easily set you on a new path. So.
Yeah, and you'll be that much more ahead of everybody else who's waiting for 3 years to implement this. And everybody says, love to see more clients. I'd love to help more people. Well, cutting 10 to 15 hours out of your process is going to help you see more clients and help more people, and have a bigger impact on the world with the advice and the services you can provide. Peter has asked a question: will a video SOA illustrate interaction with a client that supports their understanding of the advisor's recommendations? What are your thoughts on that, Fraser?
100%. And the word there, it's a really good point that Peter's put there, the interactions with a client. And clients don't always learn from going away and studying the statement of advice. The information they get is with that interaction with their advisor, and the explanations and how that works, and just recording that's the actual advice you're providing, not necessarily what was written by your compliance team in a SOA template. That's the understanding that the clients need. They need to generally, with an advisor, get them to explain it in terms and layperson's terms where they can understand it. And then you see the penny drop in the client's mind where they go, no, I get that. I understand that. And so it's just recording that as the recommendation. And if there's any ever dispute over something, whether they did or don't understand, there's a recording of it, and the client can go back and watch the recording and go, oh, that's right, I remember that now. And so from a it's helpful for clients to have that recording so they can go back and watch it. It's helpful for advisors to have that recording. It's helpful for compliance. It's helpful for PI to have that recording. It's helpful for every single piece of the channel, except maybe the litigation lawyers. But everybody else, it's helpful for. And so I think it's a really good point that Peter's put in there. Just that support the understanding. It supports the client understanding, because the clients can go back and rewatch that conversation that it took place, and if they've got more questions, they can always ask them at a later stage. But I think it's a good point.
And to that point, like if you have to jump on a call for 20 minutes with a client to re-explain something, well, you've still saved 14 hours and 40 minutes that you otherwise would have produced with an SOA, and record it and give it to them. The other thing I'd say is I have a lot of conversations with AFCA and with ASIC, and they love it when there are recordings in the file, because they can see exactly what happened. Now, if you do the wrong thing and something's gone wrong, well, you've got a recording of it, and it's, quick and easy and efficient to go, okay, I did that wrong, so let me help the client and compensate them there, or fix it for the client. Conversely, where the client has clearly gone, yeah, I understand, and explained back to you what salary sacrifice is, and most importantly, that they're not going to have access to that money until they retire, and they've explained it back to you, and they clearly get it. When the client rings up in 5 years' time and goes, why can't I access my money in superannuation? You go, well, remember when we had that conversation, and here's the recording, and go and have a look at yourself saying, yes, I understand. The client goes, okay, I remember. All right. So what do I do now? And you have a further conversation. It builds the trust. But ASIC and AFCA love it, because they can very easily see what happened. They can very easily see how the client reacted. They can see the conversation going on, or hear the conversation going on. It makes it much easier to adjudicate cases, and they'll get rid of vexatious cases very quickly when they've got the evidence there.
Yep. There's no debate. There's no. It speeds up that process no end, because everyone knows exactly what happened, and there's no grey areas. I love Lee's comment. Thanks, Lee, for jumping on. The answer. There's two things I wanted to touch on. That when people speak multi-languages or bilingual, they might have their settings set to the European language, and so the conversations on their end may come up in their language. And two, there's plenty of opportunity to be able to use some of the great tools around these days with Google Translate, or even Chat GPT to be able to translate the conversation. So I think we're very lucky with the translation tools that are available now.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same, and you can even have the subtitles coming up in different languages these days. So I don't have subtitles switched on, but probably on LinkedIn and YouTube, if you're watching them on there, the subtitles will be coming up, and you can change the languages on those, and it'll live translate for you.
Yeah, you'd have to check with your legal team over whether it could be done in another language. From feedback that we've had, it sort of does need to be in English as well as something else. You can't just have it in another language.
I'm going to come back to Tony's question in a bit, because that's jumping back to quality advice. But Peter's asked, would the client sign an authority to proceed with a video attached?
We've been through this one many times. The answer to that, Peter, it depends on your compliance requirements. The statement of advice technically is not a contract. It does not need a signature. It's not a contract under contracts law. It is you providing the advice to the client. The authority to proceed can either be signed based on your advice for your practice, and certainly for any financial services product that's implemented off the back of them. They all have applications that generally require a signature. It comes back to your compliance team. At the end of the day, what you require is client understanding, not necessarily a client signature. But then ask your lawyers, ask your compliance team, because they might have additional things over and above what's required by the Corps Act.
That's right. But the authority to proceed is not a legally required document in the Corporations Act. So it's something that licensees have put in place to make sure the client often understands the risks associated with implementing the strategy and just having something extra to sign. But I'd say if they're signing the application forms, if they're agreeing to the advice you provide, you're getting that agreement in the video SOA or at a follow-up conversation with them that you would look to also record. But if they're signing the forms, then they're agreeing to implement.
Plus, I also think you get micro authorities to proceed all along. If you're talking to your client about their scope and you say, you're happy with that? And they go, yes, that's a sort of an authority to proceed on to strategy or goals conversations. And then, are they happy with that? Yes. And that's an authority to proceed on to some of the strategies or the recommendations piece or how you come up with those. And if they're happy with that, then, you're getting these authorities throughout the timestamp throughout the video, not necessarily just at the end.
Yeah. Now I've got 2 more questions and then we'll probably wrap up. Eddie has asked, I suggest the client questions, a video response to the client's questions and objections post the meeting would be a time saver and more effective evidence. Eddie, I use Loom and I've taken, when members email us a question, I've taken to just starting the video and recording it and sending them my response. What used to happen was we would email back and forth 4 or 5 times. Now that I record a video and they can see me saying the words and they can hear me and understand me and I can share my screen if I need to share something with them, I usually get a thank you email back and that's it. They understand what I'm saying. It's clearer to them. It's engaging. Sometimes they watch the video 2 or 3 times, or share it around. But generally, it's so much easier just to record a video, taking a minute or 2 to answer the questions, and it's saving me a ton of time in emails and responses and things. So I think it's definitely a time saver, definitely a much better way to engage, Eddie.
Now I love this topic, Eddie. I don't know how many times you will have all heard this. You should have the client's words in the statement of advice. The whole idea of not making cookie cutter advice was that you want the client's words in there demonstrating their conversation. And if they're in the video, they're in the meeting that's being recorded, their words are all the way through the statement of advice. Their questions, their responses, their answers, their phrases, the way they speak, their swearing, all that stuff. It's just them. And it's in there. And it's the truth. It's a recording of the truth. So there is no doubt that, recording your client's conversations around the advice when you provide it and all the questions and all the responses that they have is 100% the whole point of, them demonstrating that they understand the information and they were across it, they liked it, they didn't like it, all those things. So, yeah.
Yep. And then just to get to Tony's question on Stephen Jones and the implementation of the quality of advice review, we are somewhat concerned that, there's an opportunity for the government to turn around and just not do anything. This was a recommendation out of the Royal Commission. So in terms of Labor and their position around the Royal Commission, they were always supportive of implementing everything. But the implementation of the Royal Commission recommendation was that a review took place. Tick, we've got there. We are working proactively with 13 other associations to try and give Stephen Jones the comfort that we are all supportive of this review having taken place. We are supportive of the government doing something with the recommendations that have come out. I think a lot of members are worried about some of the recommendations and how they actually play out. What you've got to remember is taking a single paragraph recommendation out of the report and implementing that into corporations law is going to take consultations. It's going to take drafting of legislation. It's going to take a parliamentary process. And through all of those processes, we can make sure that the right consumer protections are implemented. We can make sure that the right efficiencies are improved. We can make sure things happen in a way to make it better for us and more professional for us to provide advice to the clients, but also the right consumer protections are there as well. But the important thing is that the conversations actually happen, the consultations actually happen, the legislation is drafted, it goes through a parliamentary process, and something becomes law. Because otherwise it is just a 267 page. What do we use them for? We stick it on tables, we put drink bottles on them, we use it for scrap paper because it'll be useless. It'll be a waste of time. It will have been a waste of money. It'll be a waste of conversations if nothing happens to it. So we're trying to say to Stephen Jones as the 13 associations, we are individually having meetings with him and with the opposition and with the crossbenchers in the Senate and in the House that something has to change. We've had a year's worth of looking at financial advice and picking apart all the problems and all the costs and all the inefficiencies and why it's not a good experience for consumers. And here is a report that provides a framework for how to fix it. There are other things we would have liked to have seen. There are some things that we'd go, if you read it like that, might not be comfortable with it, but there are ways that we can see it move forward in such a way that you could implement it in a nice, safe way that doesn't harm consumers, doesn't detract from a lot of the good work and effort that's been going on over the last 15 years to better protect consumers, improve professionalisation, improve engagement. So we're hopeful he'll do something. We're going to give him every encouragement to do something, but we need everybody else to kind of be pushing in that same direction as well.
Yep, fantastic. All right, well, that probably brings us to an end. Workshops are coming up in March. Jump on the FPA website and the events tab. Get yourself along. Bring some of your colleagues if you're not sure you want to do this alone. Recruit some of your advisors and planners that are around you that you work closely with or have small peer groups with, and if you want some company to walk you through the process or to feel comfortable in taking these leaps or steps or into the unknown.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fraser, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks everybody for listening in. I'm thinking about doing some of these with some technology providers and starting to introduce some technology to members. But if you have any other topics you'd like us to jump on to LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live and cover for you, just get in touch with me and let me know, and we would be happy to do that for you. But otherwise, have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening.
See ya.